Today the goal is to talk about the life science industry, and we have an amazing panel of faculty that are going to come and talk with you about their area of research. In the beginning, we're going to talk about some of the bioscience industry dynamics. What I want to do is just give a really brief overview of what the industry is, and then we're going to do this case study about a biotech startup that's a really interesting one. I'll tell you what happened to it at the end. And through that, we can learn a lot about industry dynamics in biotech. And also, I can demonstrate how we do active learning at KGI, which means you guys have to talk a lot. So the life science industry has, we're going to actually talk about 5 segments. This is my medicine one. There are 5 big segments we're going to talk about. One is pharmaceuticals, which is usually small molecules. Like I became the dean and immediately had hypertension. Took my small molecule hypertension drug every morning, and I don't have a heart attack when I come to work and something goes wrong. So that's small molecules. Biologics is what is large molecules. So if you take insulin for diabetes, for example, that's a large molecule. Medical devices are anything that happens with a device to facilitate medical care. So things like pacemakers, surgical tools, orthopedics, things like that. And then diagnostics is actually a big focus here at KGI. If you think about it, when you go out and buy, I went out and bought a Nintendo Switch for my daughter for Christmas. If that Switch didn't work, I would take it back and get a new one, right? But the problem with medicine is like all you've really shown is that for most of the people it seems to be effective, but it's never all of the people. And so you can spend, or an insurance company could spend literally tens of thousands of dollars for medicine for you, and if it doesn't work, it's like, okay, we'll try something else, but you don't get your money back. So the thing about diagnostics is really powerful today because it helps actually predict much more accurately what is wrong with you and what medicine can or cannot work with you. Especially so-called molecular diagnostics, which we focused on a lot here, which looks for biomarkers in your body that often can predict exactly whether a medicine will work. So you're going to hear talks on all those things today, and you're also going to hear talks about ag biotech, which with 70 billion people in the world is really important that we can feed them. It's very controversial, but we believe in science here in KGI, so we're kind of believers in ag biotech, but it's a very controversial area, but Kim Grice is going to come talk on that. So I have a couple slides, just more in each of these segments. So again, if any of you guys take organic chemistry, this table, yes, for sure, right? This is small molecules, right? So it's a really hard class where you learn how basically to synthesize molecules into larger molecules, some of which act as drugs. And so it's small molecules. These are things you can almost always take as a pill. So the traditional large pharmaceutical industry, Merck, Pfizer, Lilly, these companies, BMS, all companies we've dealt with on TNP, they historically have made these small molecules. They're very cheap to manufacture, which is a big plus. Nowadays, they're created through a variety of scientific approaches. Historically, it was primarily through screening. They would have huge libraries of thousands of molecules. They develop an assay, a biological assay, little test tubes of molecules that would react positively with their test molecules, and that would be an indicator that there might be a drug here, and they go from there. So not very scientific, but today it's changed a lot, but historically through screening, and these are the larger companies, mostly back east. The California industry has been focused more around biologics, which is what we do a lot here at KGI. So you're going to hear a lot about that today. The very next talk is going to be in biologics. These tend to be more scientifically driven approaches where you're trying to understand how proteins, hormones, larger monoclonal antibodies, larger molecules interact with biological processes. And modern medicine, a lot of it is predicting how to look for targets through things like genetics, genomics, learn how to manufacture large molecules, which is really complicated. That's what bioprocessing is about. We're going to learn about that today, and create drugs accordingly. So the California bioscience industry is formed primarily around this approach. So Genentech and Amgen being the largest 2 companies are both biologics companies. So those are drugs. And then again, devices and diagnostics. There's a huge industry around that, especially here in Southern California. Anybody ever heard of Edwards Life Sciences? Edwards is one of our big clients on TNP. Anybody know what they're famous for?
Heart valves.
What is that?
Heart
valves, right? So they basically invented and they commercialized the modern heart valve first from pigs. Now they make them. They've also been very, very successful in creating a non-invasive process to replace some heart valves in your body without having open heart surgery. It's one of their biggest markets today. So they hired a bunch of our students to down right by the Orange County Airport down in Irvine. But there are many other diagnostics and device companies that we do work with. You're going to have a number of talks about that, mostly in the afternoon today. So Travis is going to talk about devices, about diagnostics. Anna Hickerson is going to talk about devices. And Kiana is going to talk about some of her research on CRISPR diagnostics and drug delivery, which ought to be terrific. Okay, so the amazing thing about this industry, we've got multiple screens going here. Oh, here we go. So I'm not going to go through this really quick because it'll take me like a half hour. This is one of the slides I show to students all the time about career. So a lot of people think in the bioscience industry, I don't know what's wrong with that screen, that it's all about just right here, discovery. This is where you clearly need a PhD and you're celebrated on the news and you discovered a new approach for a drug. But what we emphasize here at KGI is that there are zillions of jobs downstream from discovery. You need a science background for each and every one of them, but you also tend to need some other training as well. And what we provide at the Rick School is that other training. We also provide the science if you want that too. We're not anti-science here, but science is something else. So about half of our students in MBS go to this top line. We go down the value chain from identifying a need to research and development, getting it approved and going to sales. So they do market research, they do business development, finance, and marketing. About half our students. But a lot of other students go into these more technical roles, manufacturing, operations. They might do regulatory affairs, compliance. We'll learn about some of that stuff today. Are any of you, I know you are because I work with you all the time, Andrea here? I don't think we have Andrea. Andrea is the most effortlessly organized person I've ever met in my life, if you've ever worked with Andrea. She's a great project manager. So we have students all the time that I just notice are just organized to the pelt. You can get paid for being organized in this industry. There are tons of these project manager jobs. So a lot of our students do that. A lot of our students go into engineering. We have 2 programs on that, the bioprocessing program, also the device program. Some do go into science. A lot of these people that go to manufacturing and bioprocessing go over here in manufacturing operations. We have process engineers, and you're going to learn about a lot of that today. Now, one thing that's super cool is that California is the major hotbed of the bioscience industry in the country. There are other hotbeds. The biggest one is Boston for biotech, and there are other areas around the country and around the world that are good biotech. But really, the premier place is California. If you look at these stats here, there are about 3,000 companies. Not all of them are innovative, high-tech, super innovative, but a lot of them are. There's about 300,000 jobs in the state, which is a lot of jobs just in California. 7% job rate, and look at this average wage, which is about our average wage 5 years out for MBS. It's about $115,000. Make a lot of money, and this is why we're so successful, is that we're training people to go into this high-growth, high-technology industry, which is really great. The other thing that's great about it is it's super, super innovative. So here's just a partial list I came up with for myself of major biomedical innovations that are saving literally tens of thousands, if not millions of lives, every one of which was commercialized by a biotech company. All but one of these companies have at least one, or if not more. Some of them have like 50 or 60 KGI alumni. So I'll just go really quickly. Anybody know what Sovaldi is? We do that for our ethics talk. We do an ethics essay at new student orientation every year. Sovaldi is pretty much a cure for some types of hepatitis, which was uncurable before and caused your liver to fall apart and be replaced if you're lucky at some point. So it's a cure for it, commercialized by Gilead in the Bay Area. They charge $87,000 for this cure, so it's quite controversial because of that, but it is a cure. Minimally invasive heart valve surgery, we talked about that one already. Afirma, we helped this company more than any other company. They had 8 people. This is Vericide. Bonnie Anderson was on our board for many years. We're trying right now to get a TMP from them. Trying really hard to see if it's going to work for next year. But this is a way to diagnose whether you have thyroid cancer or not. In the past, every year, about 60 to 80,000 people were going in for thyroid cancer surgery that have their thyroid taken out and they find out they didn't have thyroid cancer. So unnecessary surgeries. Now, before you do that surgery, you take their diagnostic and you know for sure. So that's an example of precision medicine. Yes, heart, we hear a lot about that. That's the cell therapy where you program your immune system to fight off some types of blood cancer. We have a lot of students there. It's in the news all the time. You guys read the New Yorker? There's a big science article in the New Yorker this week about this company and this drug, about cancer therapies that harness your immune system to fight it off. So look at the New Yorker this week, so it's like we can read that. Lucentis is a cure for blindness, dry macular degeneration. Herceptin is a target. Anybody know what Herceptin is? Getting you warmed up. We're going to do a lot of talking here in a minute. Herceptin is one of the first targeted cancer therapies that's paired to a companion diagnostic. So if you're a woman and have breast cancer, you take a genetic test And if you end up having a particular set of mutations, it predicts that this medicine, Herceptin, will cure your cancer over 90% of the time. If you don't have this mutation, it won't work at all. So unfortunately, about 10 to 15% of women have this mutation, but if you have it, it's pretty much a cure for your breast cancer. So it's a targeted therapy, which is really exciting, and there's a lot of interest in that at KGI and elsewhere. A-tripla is the primary maintenance therapy today for HIV/AIDS. Panentic, it's a rare disease therapy, so we do a lot of rare disease. I think Ian's here, he's an expert on that. Epogen is the main drug that increases your red blood cell counts, that it's used for renal failure, things like that. This is why Amgen has 12,000 people in Thousand Oaks on the campus, the size of Claremont there, basically, based on this drug. It's hugely important. And Argus 2, I put that one up for fun. It's another cure for blindness. It's a device. You wear this kind of like virtual reality headset. It really like restores parts of your optical nerve so you can see again. We've had some students do internships at this company. So all of these things are just amazing technologies created by biotech companies here in California. Almost all of these companies we've been involved with one way or the other. So that's what I love about KGI, is we're preparing these students to go work in this industry to do amazing things. And that's why this is a great place to work, because we're helping with that pretty much every day. So throughout the day, you're going to be hearing about the companies and the technologies and the science that go into innovations like this. Okay, so let's switch gears now and let's talk about this case study. What I want to do here, I'm only going to go through part of what I do in the class. In the class, I have about 85 minutes, and we're going to have about an hour. So I'm just going to go through the highlights. But this is one of the first ones I teach, basically designed to teach students about how science comes out of places like KGI and is commercialized into companies. And it's sort of an overview case. So you hear a little bit about the whole process. And it's kind of fun because it's all about who doesn't want, like, I can take this pill, right, and I won't eat that anymore. Oh, I need that because I can go get another donut right now. I'm probably going to get another donut anyway. Just go right over there and get another donut, right? So let's talk about this case. So every technology in biotech, these companies have what's known as sort of a founding idea. First thing I tell the students, by the way, is you don't need to tell me my handwriting's horrible in the class evaluations. Know that already. No, it's horrible. So what is the founding idea for this company? So there's this guy, Westfall, who's a venture capitalist. I'll talk about what they are. There's this guy, Sinclair, who's a scientist. And Sinclair is at his lab at Harvard Medical School doing some experiments, and he has this eureka kind of moment when he's doing drug screening, and he thinks he has a major discovery that is linked to the effects we all know about, we read about in Italy and red wine. Anybody remember what the experiment was that got him all excited? That's the founding idea for this company. What was it? You guys remember?
The name of the thing, or like?
Yeah, what did he discover, just broadly? So he's doing, I'll give you part of it. There's like 3 parts. So what was the molecule he's working with? It's found in red wine. Resveratrol. Okay, so you have resveratrol.
I don't know, I read it.
Ask if you read it. How well did you read it? No. Resveratrol, what's he tested on? Yeast, okay. So what's resveratrol do in the yeast? What's it do to the yeast?
It improves longevity, metabolism, and health and living.
Yeah. So it improves, increases. So the main thing is it improves lifespan in yeast. But the thing is, there's already this correlation known that resveratrol was correlated with increased lifespan, but he thinks he knows why. So what is the thing that it activates in the humans, or in the yeast, that he thinks activates in the humans too?
The sirtuins?
Sirtuins, right? So there are these sirtuins. The animist is here to explain this, but I'm not going to let him because it'll take too long. It activates the sirtuins in yeast. So these are a complex of genes that basically there's this theory that if they're activated, they're dormant most of the time, but if they're activated, in theory, it puts the organism in a survival mode. And that survival mode changes aspects of its metabolism and so forth that has positive aspects on lifespan. Okay, so this is the idea, and it's just done in a lab at Harvard that they're going to start a company around. So there's a big, big difference, right, between something in a test tube involving yeast and all of us that don't eat more donuts, right? There's a real big jump there, right? So I want you to think about this. I'll give you like 45 seconds on this. If you have a piece of paper, you can write this down. So the goal of this company is to create a drug that could be sold. It's going to create a pill that I'm going to take every morning, and I can say, Eureka, I can have more dogs. So what do you think the probability, back in 2003, we've read the case study, we know some positive things are going to happen. But back in 2003, when he's in a lab at Harvard, and West Paul is going to invest, and they probably have a patent on this, what do you think the probability of successfully creating a drug is based on what they have? What's the probability from 1 to 100% of successfully developing a drug that we are going to take someday? So developing a drug, getting it approved, and selling it. What do you think the probability is? I'll give yourself 30 seconds. Think about it. What is the probability? Juliet, what did you come up with?
Well, I don't know, like, you've done a lot of context, but a very low percentage.
Okay, like what? Give me a number.
I don't know, 5?
5%, okay, so Juliet et al. Think 5%. What do you guys think? What do you think? Karen, what do you think? 1%.
Yeah.
Anybody have higher? What do you have?
I'm going to go with 8%.
8%, okay. Ask them just how many cells are in yeast? Anybody know? You guys know. How many cells are in yeast, Animash? 3. Okay, not a lot. It's like tiny little things, right? How many cells are in me? Trillions, right? Going from yeast to me is really hard, right? But what are some of the steps they have to take to get approval? Because they've just proved this in a test tube, right? So they're going to have to do preclinical tests in mice. We know they're going to do that. They also only have resveratrol, right? They actually have to have a drug, which they don't have. You can buy resveratrol and take it every morning if you want. They have to have their own formulation, right? Then they have to test that. Then they have to test it in humans and a series of trials from like tolerability stage 1 to efficacy to phase 3. They also actually have to have a target for the drug because it's not in the case study, but the FDA, or maybe it is, the FDA has said that aging is not a disease. So they come up with diabetes later on, we'll talk about that. Then you have to get it approved, then you have to sell it, right? There is like a ton of work to go ahead, and if any of that fails, they're dead. So if you just are doing the stuff where you just do random screening, it just basically from your chemical library and you have a hit, that lore is it's about a 1 in 10,000 shot of getting it approved. Why is this more than 1 or 2%? What's the difference here? I'd say it's probably not 1 in 10,000. It's probably in the 1% range. Because they've got a theory, right? They've got a theory why it works, and there's anecdotal evidence about resveratrol in wine extending lifespan. And they've got a scientific mechanism here, right? So this is not randomness, this is based on science, and there's some anecdotal evidence. So it's probably not the 1 in 10,000, it's like the 1 or 2%. You guys are smart, that's why you got TGI. Okay, so I'm gonna do a chart here. And on the y, you guys are so smart. Usually this fools everybody too, but you guys are so smart. How do I can be fooled?
No, I
So this is the probability
overestimated.
from 0 to 100 of an outcome occurring. And this is the financial payoff that search risk is going to get eventually. So again, this is 2003 in the beginning. So this is basically the money earned, expected money, from lose everything, right, which is a big unhappy investor, right, to what happens if things go great? Like billions of dollars, right? They're going to be the next Amgen. They're making billions of dollars. Right? Who doesn't? Like the problem with my students that are like 21. They don't see the problem. They're going to live forever already. But you guys, you're taking this drug, right? You're there. So it's billions of dollars. And you're happy, right? Okay, so what I want you to do is sketch out what this curve looks like. So there's a probability of losing everything. There's probabilities in the middle, and there's a probability at billions of dollars. And in theory, it should all add up to 100%, right? Because all the probabilities add up to 100%. So what do you think this curve looks like? Why don't you take like a minute and kind of sketch this out? It's fun. A lot of the students are having the bell curve, by the way, which is wrong too. So we figured out that in the beginning, we just said it's a 99% chance of it not working, right? So what happens if it doesn't work? They lose everything, right? You're not going to get anything for failure, right? So there's a 99% chance like this, that you're losing everything. And then at this point, there's literally like a 1% chance of making failure. So you're pretty close, right? So it's really bipolar. At this point, it's just going to work or it's not. Now the company is going to do things along the way that will both change these like up and down, and can also create different outcomes. Like if they end up licensing to a big company at the end, they just gave half their money away, but they also, there's no chance of losing anything because they're giving them hundreds of millions of dollars. Now it's in the middle somewhere. So you can make it a bell curve, but in the beginning, it's pretty much all or nothing. Okay, I want to do one more thing, then I'm going to show you the video of this company from 60 Minutes, which is kind of fun. So my question now is, so there are these venture capitalists, right? Anybody know what a venture capitalist is? So what's a venture capitalist at?
Basically somebody can put so much money into a company, but I'm sure it's going to work. But
Yep.
and
what do they get in exchange for putting the money in the company?
we get equity.
They own part of the company. You guys ever watch Shark Tank?
Yeah.
This is Shark Tank, right? So they're going to invest money and they're going to take shares in the company in return, basically, because it's so risky. It's not like you can just take over their house. It's not like us buying a house where you don't pay the payment, they get your house. They don't make the payment, they fail, you lose it all, right? So you turn basically money for equity. So my question is, who in their right mind is willing to invest the initial investment in this company? If you look at Appendix 4 in the case, over the first 6 months, they attracted $18 million in venture capital for basically the idea and the team. $18 million. So let's think about under what conditions would that make sense? Has anybody ever done an expected value calculation? Do you know what that is? This will help you in life a lot. I love these expected value calculations. So the basic formula is expected value equals, you sum the probability of each outcome times the payoff of that outcome up to 100. But in this case, there's just 2. So it's the probability of success times the payoff or the revenue of success plus the probability of failure times the payoff for failure, right? So what we're saying here is that this venture capitalist must have done a calculation, and the expected value has to be at least $18 million for this to make sense. It actually needs to be a lot more than that because they don't own all the company, they just own part of the company. But say they owned all the company. So the expected value, this has to be $18 million, is greater than the probability of success, which we know is 0.01, right? And the probability of failure is 0.99. If you put these numbers in, do the math, it has to be over $18 million and nobody will succeed. It actually has to be a lot more than $18 million because they're going to want to return, right? So this is, thank gosh, this is 0. And this is billions, right? So you can get a calculator and do this, but this company needs to make literally hundreds of millions of dollars just to break even for the venture capitalists for this to make sense. So that's why they get the money. Part of the reason is the returns to that 1% are so high that 1 out of 100 times they're happy. Now the other question is, you and I, we would never invest our lucrative PA craft pension on a 1 in 100 shot of making a lot of money, right? What's different about the venture capitalists that allow them to do that? They have a lot of money. What else do they have? Anybody knows diversification? Right? We were diversified, right? You buy that Vanguard index fund, right? With all 500 low cost, that's what you should buy. You're happy, right? They're in the same way. They have dozens of these investments, right? So you have a lot of investments. Some of them they'll get a little bit of money back. Some of them are going to fail. And a few of them they'll make 10, 20, 30 times return and be good. So that's how these venture capitalists invest. And it's sort of different from our kind of world. But that expected value thing is super useful to try to figure out these probabilities and so forth. Okay, so let me show you a short video. I'm just going to show you so I only have like 40 minutes. I'm going to show you a video of what this company looked like back in about 2007. It's the same time as when you read the case. You're going to watch the 60 Minutes. Okay, so what's the audience for 60 Minutes? Well, Sandy and me, right? These kind of like, it's not our young students. They're like, what the hell, 60 Minutes? I've never heard of it, right? But it's like, is it for like, is it scientifically literate, super fancy people with KGI? I want you to keep that in mind when you watch this. Is this company, so in this video you're going to see Westfall and you're going to see Sinclair, you'll see the labs, you'll see their offices and they show some of the experiments. But I often have the students do an ethics reflection on this company at the end. And to think about that, listen carefully to the claims they're making for something that is not in humans yet. This is in preclinical. Listen carefully to the claims they're making.
Years ago, 60 Minutes first examined the so-called French paradox, which suggested that the French, despite a high-fat diet and high consumption of wine, and remarkably low incidence of heart disease compared with America. Most researchers agreed that there was something in the wine that offered protection. And a few years later, even the highly cautious federal dietary guidelines say that moderate consumption of red wine can be beneficial. Now, scientists across the country have identified a substance in red wine called resveratrol that they believe might do more than just protect the heart, but could, in very high concentrations, significantly extend life by preventing a number of age-related illnesses. If they're right, we all may soon be taking a pill that could give us an extra decade or two of healthy old age.
If the promise holds true, I think this has the chance to change healthcare.
Dr. Christoph Westphal says we all may soon be taking a drug that just might beat the clock, a simple pill that could delay the inevitable.
Our goal is to prevent and forestall many of the diseases that strike us as we reach 50, 60, and 70, all with one pill.
What you're suggesting is that it's some kind of rejuvenation drug that turns a 70-year-old into a 35-year-old.
That might be pretty hard to do, but I think if we're on a train heading one direction, we can slow down that train. I think we can slow down these genes that control the aging process.
That quest to put death on hold began in 2003 when Westphal met David Sinclair, a biochemist at Harvard, who was studying the genetic components of aging.
5 years ago, I met David, and he had shown that you could extend lifespan in yeast. That's pretty exciting. Now,
If you happen to be a yeast, it's very exciting. Yeast are one thing, human beings are more complicated. So Sinclair focused on a gene present in almost all life forms, the sirtuin gene. It's normally inactive, but when it is active, Sinclair believes it triggers a survival mechanism that extends life. Convinced that something in nature could activate that gene, Sinclair randomly tested thousands of compounds. And bingo, he got a hit, resveratrol.
when I Googled this resveratrol, I was shocked to find that red wine was the top hit.
Red wine is brimming with resveratrol. It's found in high concentration in the skin of the grape and seems to play a role in protecting it from invading bacteria and fungi.
Were you aware of the research into red wine that it offered certain health benefits?
Oh, sure. I mean, that's why I almost fell off my chair when the link was made, and I thought that this was a potential explanation for the benefits of red wine.
Convinced they were on the verge of a major scientific breakthrough, Sinclair and Westphal launched Cirtrus, a Cambridge, Massachusetts research company. They, along with a handful of other cutting-edge biotech companies, are developing resveratrol-based drugs that they believe zero in on the longevity gene.
The important news here is not that we found something in red wine. The important thing is that we passed a milestone where we can now make drugs based on this knowledge and potentially slow down aging itself.
Everyone from plastic surgeons to your friendly snake oil salesman have been promising a ticket to eternal youth for some time. So the prospect of a prescription pill based on red wine that could trigger a longevity gene sounds too good to be true. And yet, science...
So he's going to talk about caloric restriction and show a bunch of people that are on these low-calorie diets. They look awful. But I'm going to fast forward that. Here are these people are here. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some of the mice. And they show some of the food.
The skinnies may not die young, but given their diet, they just might die of boredom. If the circus are the right track, it could be forget dieting, forget the sweaty business of working out. Just pop a pill, and you are in guilt-free couch potato paradise.
We have a pill that can mimic many of the effects of calorie restriction or exercise.
So one can be very healthy and obese at the same time.
Our goal is healthy individuals, ideally via lifestyle, and if that doesn't work, we believe that we'll have a pill that can mimic that.
A pill that in effect diets for you. A pill that turns on the survival gene.
And what we're trying to do with our drugs here is to put the body in a defensive state, to ring the alarm bells and get the body to defend itself, instead of dieting to set the alarm off pop a pill.
The pill is a highly concentrated form of resveratrol, a virtual vineyard of healthy living.
How much red wine would you have to drink to get the kind of resveratrol that you're using?
The sad news is that you'd need to drink about 1,000 bottles a day of red wine, which I don't recommend.
The pill itself may not extend lifespan, but could prevent the diseases of aging, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, even cancer.
What we're talking about is activating the body's natural genetic defenses against diseases, and that's very powerful if we can harness that.
Resveratrol has been tested on mice and the results have been encouraging. In this test video provided by Centris, both of the mice have been fed a high-fat diet for 12 weeks. But when placed on a treadmill, the mouse on the right ran twice as far. He was taking high concentrations of resveratrol.
You have fat mice, and you have fat mice with resveratrol, and the ones that are on resveratrol, they can run twice as far, and they live longer, about 20% longer.
Other studies showed that among mice fed a high-fat diet, those given resveratrol didn't gain as much weight as those not given the drug. Sinclair believes that resveratrol actually changes the physiology of the mice. The proof, he says, is in the post-mortem.
Their organs looked pristine, youthful, fat-free, and their physiology was just like they were dieting, but they were fat.
Convinced they were on the right path, they fast-tracked the drug into human trials.
Okay, so why don't we stop there? But this, you can watch the whole thing on thing. It's pretty entertaining, right? So
Start watching 60
It's always way it's very smart, I think, don't you think?
Yeah.
This is the research that is the nice. They're like, yeah, I think this. It's always, if it works out, world's going to be a better place, right? If this happens, if that happens, it's super high risk. But let's talk some more about how this company is organized. I've watched that video probably 100 times now, and it's entertaining. Okay, so if you happen to have it, I just want to really briefly talk about the stages of development of these companies. And going back to the financial thing, right, we know that, like, if you look at this exhibit 4 at the end here, it's on page 16, we know that it's going to take something like $100 million to get this thing even close to the market. In the beginning, they get $5 million, then a couple months later, they get another $13 million. So their so-called seed capital round is $18 million. So one of the things that's interesting about biotech and what makes it palatable, given how risky it is that you can divide the stages of development of the companies into so-called milestones and use your success at each milestone to get more money to fund the next milestone. So you don't need to ask for the $100 million on day one. You could ask for $18 million on day one, do a lot of work, show that you're making progress, and when you do, go ask for more money. So just real briefly, so what do you think some of these milestones were? What was the milestone between stage A and B? You don't have to know this, don't worry, but what do you think it probably is? If you're in my class, you need to know it, but for you guys, just for fun. What do you think the next milestone was? So they had test tube, but they did this experiment on yeast and it worked. What was the next experiment that they did? They just showed it actually. Mice. They showed resveratrol extended lifespan in mice. Why is the mouse experiment so fundamental? You guys are on this, right? These guys ready for employment. You gotta work here forever, you're ready. In mammals, right? So it's a human system. So the sirtuins are conserved from yeast to mouse, but from mouse to humans, it's a little thing that drives me nuts. But besides that, it's a mammal. So that's good. What is the next step after that? What else did they have to do? Later on, but before that, what else do they have to do? What don't they have yet? They've got resveratrol in a mouse. What do they need? They make their own drug. That's STR-501, right? This is the thing that's 1,000 times more concentrated. Because you can't packet resveratrol. You can go to the health supplement store and buy it anytime you want, right? This case has been around for a while. For like the first 3 years, I took it all the time. Like, oh, let me get some resveratrol. Then I read that like half these supplement companies, there's no active ingredient in it. And then I decided, well, if you buy it from Canada, it has to have you have to approve in Canada. So you want to buy your supplements from Canada, but it's a lot more expensive from Canada. And a while I said, I'm just not going to bother anymore. But you can just go and buy the supplement, right? So now they have their own formulation that they can patent. STR501 is patented. So what's the next phase after that? You've had it, and then what do they have to do?
Is that the trials?
Not yet. They got to show that that works on mice, right? That their drug works with mice. So they've done that. Then, in most of these companies, they're going to do other clinical trials in higher order animals. I'm not sure about this one. But then eventually they're going to get to humans. So what did they do with humans? They did limited clinical trials in India on tolerability. So they basically had some people in India, this is an outsourced thing, so it's for like quintiles or something. They had them take STR501 for a couple of weeks, first at low doses and possibly a little bit higher doses, and they looked at the effect on them in terms of can they take it, are there, because this kind of drug, there probably can't be a lot of side effects. Because in theory, healthy people are going to be taking this, right, to prevent getting these horrible things. So you're not going to tolerate a lot of side effects, right? So they showed that there was some the tolerability looked good in a short time period in humans in India. And that's where they are at the end of the case. Now notice here that the money gets higher and higher, and this is not a crucial thing for you. None of this is crucial, but this is especially not crucial. You go from high-risk venture capitalists to institutional investors at the end, like you have the owner of the Red Sox and things like that. And the reason why is at the end, we still have this same curve before where it's like 99 and 1. But at the end here, it was 99. Well, look, now it works in mice. Maybe it's 95, right? Oh, look, now we've got our own formulation and that works in mice too. Now there's like a 90% chance of failure and a 10% chance of success. So if you say it's 90 and 10, all of a sudden, it's not as risky as an investment. It's still super risky, but it's 10 times less risky as it was before, if this math is correct, right? So the idea is that every time the milestone is complete, it becomes more and more likely that it might not fail, that it might actually work. And as a result, the valuation of the company increases, and it's possible to get more money at a higher valuation because it's less risky, and that's what they're doing. So they use, I love Zelda. Love me some Zelda. We've got our GameCube out right now. We're doing Twilight Princess this summer. All right, so that's what's going on there. So they use these milestones to increase the value of the company, and they leverage that for more and more money. And that's what's going on there in Table 4. Okay, so I want to do, the other major thing I wanted to do is the main thing we actually do in the class I teach, which is called market assessment. So one of the things we do a ton of at KGI is we have our students, like in the class I teach, I do these cases, I do a bunch of them like this, and then I go out to technology startup companies that are usually in incubators and accelerators, and also at universities, and they're just getting going, just like this company, and they have these technologies, and we have our students go out and try to figure out, okay, that technology looks cool, but is there a market for it? So the question we ask a lot is, what makes a bioscience technology attractive in a commercial sense? So let's look at this diabetes market from the point of view of Citrus, and I'll have you guys talk somewhere now. The diabetes market, what makes it attractive? So in my real class, by the way, I go half as fast, because we have twice as much time. So I'll go a little fast today. What makes this market attractive? And we want to look at two things. First, just the characteristics of the type 2 diabetes market. And then second, and this is a big power word for Scott here, the positioning of Citrus's drug on this market. So it's not just how attractive it is, but what is the value proposition created by their product on this market? How attractive is that? So these are some of the big things we look at all the time here. So let's look at diabetes. It's actually type 2. So what are some of the things you'd look at if you were doing an analysis of this market? How many people have the disease? Do you happen to know that? It's a lot. It's how many in the US? Anybody know? It says in the case about 30 million, it's about $33 million people today. It's a lot. How many people are there in the United States? 330 million, it's about 10%. That's a ton of people if you think about that, right? So about 33 million people. That equals the prevalence, right, of this disease. And related to that, we also look, is it, and this is sort of very, very kind of dark, in that the things the companies like, oh yeah, great, tons of sick people, and guess what, it's growing all the time. Because I wanted a donut, that's why. Right, so And it's growing, right? So market dynamics are really important, right? Plus there's a high growth rate. I don't know what it is. Okay. What other characteristics would you look at if you're doing a market analysis of this? So what else would you look at?
Are there other things in the market?
The competition, right? So how is it treated? So how do we know? What do you know about that, Julia? How's it treated?
I don't know, diet change and insulin?
Try diet change, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Then they have, insulin is a late stage therapy. There are all these modulator therapies like Similan, Amylin's drug, or BMS's drug now. So it's treated basically, is there a cure? No cure, right? So it's treated with palliative treatment, primarily insulin, but there are other ones as well, right? So no cure. By the way, what kind of drugs are these? Are they small molecule or are they biologics? They're biologics, which means what?
They're expensive.
They're injected, right? What happens with injections? You like that, injections? Not at all, right? So it leads to compliance issues, right? So it's a biologic, which means it's injected, which means there's good compliance. Going back to the disease, is how serious is this disease? Like what happens if it's not treated? Yeah, you have bad thing, you get cardiovascular issues, you might get infections that go crazy and your foot out. A lot of these people have amputations. It's super serious, right? Is it chronic or is it acute? Right, so these are all things you look at, right? How serious is it? One of the reasons that seriousness is important is it leads to the question is, will it be reimbursed or not? And the answer here is probably yes, right? So insurance companies are interested in treating it, even if they're just horrible bean counter type companies. If they don't treat it, the next thing that happens, being in a hospital for an amputation or having cardiovascular issues, is even more expensive, right? So it's reimbursed is the term, right? So it's chronic, serious, and reimbursed. Okay, reimbursed. Another thing at the end of the day, serious. I can't spell it either. It's chronic and it's serious. It's really hard to spell in front of 50 people. It's a horrible disease. The other thing about it is the drugs in this disease, they're all FDA regulated. It's worth having that because that's a barrier to entry. You have to go to the FDA to have a treatment in this area, right? So it's FDA regulated. Go just to the bad. Okay. So this is some characteristics of this disease. How is STR-501 positioned on this landscape? So what's different and what's similar about it? So is that?
It's not a biologic.
Not a biologic. So what? So I do my class for special. So I have a TA sitting over there, and she has like a rubric. That'd be a 1-point answer on my 3. You gotta do more. Gotta do more.
So
stating a fact, you get one. You gotta explain why. What's it matter?
It's a small pharmaceutical and one compliance issue they can take anything compliance and stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
Now what would your score have been?
That'd be a 3. Like the best one of the day, I give a 1, a 3, or a 4. I don't give anybody 2s. 1 is like stating facts, and 3 is giving the critical thinking behind this fact. And 4 is saying something I've heard 10 times before. And I've done this case like 50 times, so I've heard it all before. But every once in a while somebody comes up with something new. So like if these professors over here are talking, it would be something new and incredible. So that's the kind of people we have here at PHI. You're our regular students. So better compliance, right? And the other thing about it is it's cheaper to make. It's like cheap. So the probability is going to be higher. What other factors would you look at for STR-501? A couple others. There's one that's huge. Yeah, that's right. Man, you're getting an A. I don't know if that would have been an easy. So you got to explain that. Why is it what? So what's actually the target market for this? Who takes it?
Anybody?
Who takes anybody? pre-diabetic, people that had metabolic syndrome. So it would be people over a certain age that are overweight, or people that are plain overweight, which is, what percent of America is overweight? It's like 40%, right? So you probably start with people over an age that are overweight, or people that have their glucose tests or HbA1c tests are elevated but not a diabetic yet. It would be pre-diabetic. So this market is, these people might be taking it too, but it's not going to cure it. It's going to help. But it's all the people that could get it. So it's a different target market, right? So there's this idea that you can expand the market. Pre-diabetic people take it, right? So I don't know how large that is, but it's got to be 60, 70 million people are going to be taking this thing, right? So it's this huge market, right? So that's why it's a different approach. This is, and it's preventative. Right? So here, it just making it not get worse, right? Which is still really important, right? It halts the progression of disease, is super important, and it manages the disease. That's really important, these drugs. But here, you're not getting the disease at all, right? So it's a massive improvement in the standard of care. And it expands the market at the same time, right? So doctors are happy, because all those endocrinologists, they're not going to see as many diabetes patients, right? They're happy. But insurance companies are happy, and the insurance company's not happy. The company is happy. Insurance company is like, they're wondering about this, but the company is happy because the market's a whole lot bigger, right? It's a lot bigger, probably twice as big. So how long are you going to take this? Probably forever, right? I mean, it might be that you somehow slim down and you're now, like I now weigh 120 pounds somehow and things are great, I don't take it anymore, but more likely I'm just going to keep eating my donuts and I'm going to live longer because of it, and so forth, right? So, and the result of it, it's a chronic, right? So long-term regime in terms of taking it, right? You take it forever, basically, right? So in terms of you're an insurance company doing this, if you're Circus and you're investors, you're really, really happy because it's sadly a really, really horrible disease. A lot of people are happy that's improving, that's getting more and more. You can regulate it, but you can't cure it. And it's chronic. Here, you have a small molecule that's easier to administer for compliance. You have a larger target market. You can prevent you getting the disease at all. And you end up taking, it's not like a one-time cure like Sovaldi. You take it forever, basically, right? Can you see why these investors are so happy to invest in this thing now? If this works, it's a total 100% gold mine. If it works, it's a gold mine. It's a big deal for this stuff. Because even at our best case scenario, we still think it's going to fail like 80 to 90% of the time, remember that. But it's still super attractive. Just briefly, they also talk about the nutraceuticals market. Because their strategy to get money is to become real popular. So they've been running up in the Wall Street Journal all the time, and there's Maury doing a 60 Minutes piece, right? So everybody's interested in this, and they realize that it's going to take, even if everything works, it's going to take 4 or 5 years to do all the clinical trials, because one of the issues of taking it all a day is that you have to prove long-term tolerability. So you're not going to take this one pill, you're going to take one pill the rest of your life, right? It has to have long-term tolerability. So these trials take a long time to do. So people are saying, well, can we take it right now? Or can we take like maybe a less powerful version right now as a nutraceutical? So how many of you guys take nutraceuticals? Supplements like vitamins. Who takes vitamins? All right, this table, not as much. Ian, you're not taking vitamins? You're super healthy. You just have that great diet, right? That Mediterranean diet does it for you. Well, I take mine pretty much every darn day. I'm Mr. Vitamin. Okay, so let's look at the nutraceutical. So what do we know about this market? How big is it? It's like $20 billion, right? It's huge, right? So it's a big market, and that's everything under the sun, right? But it's a big market. What else do we know about it? Okay, so what does that mean? Again, that's a one-pointer.
The ingredients that it says it has isn't necessarily in it.
Okay, say it again now.
So if it could claim to have certain ingredients, but it may not be in it because it's not.
Yeah, who knows if they're telling the truth?
Right.
It's not regulated, right?
They choose to be,
Yeah.
right?
So you can go to the market without getting approval. What can't you do if it's not regulated? What can't you do? You ever watch the Costco? Yeah, say that really loud.
You can't make medical claims?
Yeah, cannot make medical claim. You cannot say this cures this disease. So look at the Costco supplement. It's always glucosamine promotes healthy joints. And there's one for healthy brains. I'm always like, I don't have a brain, I got nothing. So I'm like, healthy brain, that's what I'm looking for, right? But it can't make health claims, right? So there's no health claims. The other thing about not regulated, though, is that regulation creates what the business people call a barrier to entry. It's really hard to get FDA approval because you have to do all these studies. You know, it costs tons of money to do it. You have to do the studies, prove that it works, and go to the government for approval. Here, well, what happens if things go bad with this? Just, they're going to sue you, right? Hire a lawyer, right? It's just court law, and they're going to sue you. And you can still get sued out of business, but you don't have to prove anything. You can't make health claims, but there's a much, much smaller barrier to entry, right? So as a result, there's going to be a lot of entry. There's anybody can compete. So what does that mean for a company like Surface? What are the implications of that? Yeah, so what, say they enter, say, you might have seen this on 60 Minutes, a little thing, it says 60 Minutes. You know, you might have Maury, Maury's safer there, seems, although he died a couple years ago, back of the year, he seemed really into this, right? As endorsed by Morley Safer, right? So you can have all of that, right? But the next company over, so this is, they probably have some fancy name for it. The next company over is going to have a slightly different name with the same colors, the same everything, find another person to endorse it. And how are you going to know one from the other? Or from the other to the other? So what do you have to do as response to that? What do you have to spend money on to hire Scott and his friends, right? And you have to do marketing, right? You have to market it to death, right? So on this stuff, they still do marketing, but for the most part, you got a monopoly. You just have to market to doctors. Maybe for this, there'd be some direct-to-consumer advertising. But in supplementals, it's mostly marketing driven, right? So there's a big thing there. Another thing, we hear this at KJ all the time. Every time we're starting a new program, we get worried about cannibalization. So cannibalization in this case is what? So they go to the market with their supplement version. Then a few years later, they want to go to their fancy FDA-regulated version. Are you worried that that would cannibalize that market? Because, well, it seems to be working well on the low-dose version. Why do I want to spend all this more money on the high-dose version? Right, so there's this cannibalization risk at the end of the day. The big thing, though, is just the not regulated type thing. And a lot of the times, you see this at KGI a lot, we have an identity as a science-based organization. So we don't like doing things that are not science-based. Same thing with this company. They have a bunch of fancy scientists working here from Harvard, and they're pretty high pretentious, right? And they're like, well, we're going for cures for serious diseases here. We're not competing with, GNC, General Nutrition Store, whatever it is, GNC supplements, right? So they actually didn't do this. But it would be a way to, if you look at that curve we started with in the beginning, if they would have done this, if you look at this probability distribution, they probably are not making billions of dollars anymore because they're cannibalizing the billions of dollars market. But they can start making a lot of money right away. Like, how much money would you spend per day? It's also not reimbursed. Another one. Kind of going quick. I usually have my notes. Not reimbursed. You guys don't get notes. You just get it. Just do it. I usually have my notes. Forgot the reimbursed. Not reimbursed. As a result, it's out of pocket. So would you spend $5 a day on this? So do the math on that times 365 days. That's like $1,700 a year you'd spend on this. Yun's out. Yun is out, right? So we're probably get a lot more than that is the drug that actually stops you from getting diabetes, right? Some of these drugs are crazy expensive. I was looking at some of them. There are all these new weight loss drugs that come out, like Saxenda. It costs like $8,000, $9,000 a year. These daily injectables that's supposed to stop you from gaining weight. And they regulate, they do some regulation. They're super expensive, right? So they probably be in that range. So the market's a lot lower. So they start making money right away, but they wouldn't make as much. So remember before we had this lever like this? This is what makes it more of a bell curve. It ends up being more like this. Because you're not going to lose at all anymore. But the chance of you making billions of dollars goes away because now we're on this market that you just make less money for sure. Right? So it changes that's the trade-off they've got on this. Let's do like one more quick thing. So one of the big things in the bioscience industry is partnering or alliances. So it talks about this in the case quite a bit right at the end when they're making decisions. They also talk about in-licensing, but we won't do that. You have to come and do the full 90-minute version for in-licensing. But for partnering, so one of the things that says in here somewhere is that, it's on page 10, all these companies are super excited about partnering with them, and they're offering these deals. So from the point of view of these small companies, what do large pharmaceutical companies have that Westfall and Sinclair and Certarus want? They've got perhaps money. What else?
They can do the clinical trials and stuff?
They can do the downstream development and clinical trials, and that's probably the most important thing. So they have assets that they don't have. But there's another thing that's important that's actually mentioned here, which is this company, the next step in their evolution is to do what's known as an initial public offering. Anybody know what that is, IPO? Zach, you're into this stuff. What's an IPO?
An IPO is an initial public offering. Basically, always an opportunity for you to go to investors, say, buy a piece of my stock and take that money and invest it back in the company, but
Yeah.
I know a piece of my stock.
So like Uber did their IPO recently, right? Lyft did too. So the venture capitalists, up to now, the only way they can make their money back, even though the company's worth a lot more, everybody's saying, right? The only way they can make their money back is a private sale of their shares to somebody else, which is hard. Or if they do an initial public offering in the stock market, now you can freely buy and sell shares. So these initial investors, they want what's known as an exit. They want to be able to get out of the investment and harvest all their profits. And it's either through an initial public offering or sometimes an acquisition. You can do that too. But an initial public offering is crucial for that. But this stuff, you see how crazy complicated it is already? Right? And all of you guys are investors in the stock market through TA, correct, right? Every one of us, I assume, right? You probably have some of your money in just some index fund. And somebody that's not these guys over here. The only persons I trust over there really the Amish. Maybe a little Ken. You guys know the science. You know, the rest of us are just people that are like, think we know the science, but we don't know the science at all, right? And we're making these decisions. So the main thing that the pharmaceutical companies have that's super valuable is that when they endorse a company by investing in them or partnering with them, it's a signal to the rest of the world, i.e. us, that this company it's got it. This company is good. Because why in the world would Glaxo or Pfizer, who really knows this stuff, right? They have the scientists, they have it all. They're doing their due diligence. They have 50,000 people working there doing this stuff. If they say this is worth investing in, it must be good. So it basically validates the promise of the company to the stock market and the broader world. That's why they do these deals all the time with pharma companies. It's for money, it's for expertise, and it's for validation. So you guys got that? Great. That was really good. So if you look at this, and I'm going to tell you this is the most ludicrous deal you're ever going to see in the world. It's not a realistic deal if you look at other ones. But if you look at page, it's like Exhibit 9, I think. Yeah, here it is, Exhibit 9 on page 20. So this company, remember, everybody thinks this, it's on 60 Minutes at this point. It's in the Wall Street Journal. The Red Sox guy is invested. Everybody thinks this is going to change the world, right? So this is like Tesla when people trusted them, right? It's like before Elon Musk became crazy. It's like Tesla for crazy Musk. Okay, so this is like the deal term you get at that case. So it's a 5-year deal term with a 19% or 51% equity stake at a 50% premium to the most recent share price, right? So if the share price was $100 per share in the most recent private fundraising thing through venture capitalists, we'll pay $150. So we'll pay 50% more, and we'll buy either half the company or a little bit of the company. They always buy some of the company to create mutual commonality, so they have an interest in staying with it together. That's why they do that. $75 million up front for an exclusive option to join Certarus in the STR1 activator program. So $75 million, just first money, enjoy it, go to the beach, or whatever you're going to do. Invest it in your R&D, just money. And then 5 years of guaranteed R&D support totaling $100 million, payments to step up over time, $10 million in year 1, right? So we're going to pay all the internal R&D for STR501. You're not going to have to raise any more money, we'll do it all. We're going to pay for it. And then if the next one, it's a 50-50 split on profits. So it's kind of like Hollywood though. This is not revenues, it's profits, so think about that. But still, 50-50 split on profits, and we're going to do all the work. They're going to do all the marketing and stuff, and you can learn how to do it. And then another $200 million in milestones as it goes through clinical trials. So this is great, right? Great. So if you look at this curve thing again, So there's absolutely no risk of losing it all anymore, right? Because they're giving them $75 million plus another $200 million if it starts to work, right? So you get $275 million in fund money. Plus they're going to do all the R&D for you. Plus, so that's the plus. But what's the cost? What are they giving away? Some equity. What else are they giving away?
Profit.
Half the profits, right? They're giving away half the profits, right? So 50-50 profit split. That sounds good because most of these deals, like you're now getting 10% and they're taking 90. So it's only 50-50, but you just gave away half of your billions, right? You just gave that away. So again, it ends up being something like this rather than this or this, right? So you're switching. So the company at the end of the day they basically have a choice. You want to be in this high risk, high reward thing where maybe this is 20 and this is 80. Or you want to be in this world through the pharma deal where you're going to for sure make it as a company, for sure. Even if this fails, you now have a couple $100 million to spend on your next discovery program, right? That's the worst case scenario. But you cannot make billions anymore. You're making half a billions, right? So that's the choice they have at the end of this case. What do you think they did? And I sped this up a lot because it's been a long time. I spent like 15 minutes of this in the class. So would you, if you're in this company, would you give away half the promise for a pretty much, you're going to survive a lot longer now, no risk of going out bust, or are you in it to win it, like an 80% chance you're failing, 20% chance you're the next Amgen? That's the choice they have, right? What are you guys doing? What do you think?
I think the deal.
You're taking the deal. Who else is taking? Anybody else taking the deal?
I'm not too much of
You're not taking the deal? You guys not sure?
I'm going 80.
Okay, Zach is going 80-20. He's our technology guy. All right, go big or go home, right? It's like there's some other correspondences I've seen. Westfall calls us going for the gold. Now, Westfall is a venture capitalist, and you can argue that they don't need the validation part for this deal, because they're already on 60 Minutes and all the rest of it, right? So you're right, Zach. So they actually turned down this deal, and they went for the gold. They actually did an IPO right after this and raised a lot of money. But then the interesting thing is, about a year later, at a very high valuation of $760 million, they sold themselves out to Glaxo. So they got acquired by Glaxo. By the way, this is not Wall Street. This is not rich people on equity. This is not whatever it is, option traders, derivatives traders, hedge funders. How much money do you think Westfall made about this on this? Made about $7.5 million after all of this, because he gave away all the equity on these VC deals all the time. Anybody know what happened to this company? Anybody ever heard of it? It failed. That's why. So right after this happened, they were doing these trials on patients, and they were actually doing some cancer indications too. And in some of the early clinical trials, people started having kidney problems, which is a long-term tolerability issue, right? So they had to kill the trial. So this thing failed completely. And then Glaxo got in a lot of trouble. And I can't spend a lot of time on this, because I'm going to stay on track. Larry, you come get set up if you want. I'll finish up. Because I want everybody to have 45 minutes. I only took an hour and a half, but these guys get 45 minutes. But, actually, I only took 75 minutes with you. I can go into this more, but what happened was, it's a competitive world, and everybody thought sirtuins was like the most important thing going. So what happened was, these other companies had their own research going on sirtuins. Amgen and Pfizer tried to replicate Sinclair's mouse research with resveratrol, and neither of them could get it to work. So they published in high-profile science journals saying that Sinclair, you're an idiot, or I can't get it to work. And at that point, Glaxo looked like they were really dumb, because they hadn't done this research, they just bought the company. And then Sinclair, for the last 5 years, has been trying to salvage its reputation. At the end of the day, and if I would have given this stuff to Anish, he could explain this like brilliantly, because he knows this stuff. There is an article in Nature about a year ago that Sinclair came out with, showing that one of the probes he used to apparently prove that the sirtuins had been activated in his experiments is sort of co-indicated in actually activating the sirtuins along with resveratrol. And the other companies weren't using that probe. So it's probably that it works, but you actually need this probe too. You need more than just resveratrol, so it's a lot more complicated. And at the end of the day, it's back in the laboratory where it probably should have stayed. One last thing, do you think this guy, though, that 60 Minutes thing, knowing that there's like a 90% chance this is failing, would you go and tell your grandparents that, don't worry about your fat little grandkid, because he's going to be taking this pill, and he's going to be okay, and he can have all the ice cream he wants? because this friendly scientist on 60 Minutes with Morley Safer said it's going to be okay. And the thing with this, it's sullied the environment for other companies to raise money because they're so aggressive in selling their story. So that's one of the things about this.